when you're in the personality, you're experiencing your true self, but you're not paying any attention to it. If it wasn't there, you wouldn't be here. The personality is just a surface version of the reality of it. But if it wasn't there, the personality wouldn't be here. The personality is dependent on the existence of awareness. It's to practice not being hypnotized. It's to practice not having the thought process determine your experience. Or you could say it another way, it's to practice not having circumstances determine your experience, because the thought process is a circumstance. It's a way that the thought process is a way that circumstances get created. They get conceptualized in thinking, right? But without that being the case, what's happening? Nothing. That's why the natural state is called freedom. From what? Everything. Nothing's happening. When you're looking through the eyes of a separate self, it looks like the world is separate from you. It's the view. The view you have is like the view you have, if we didn't have the knowledge about the earth being round and we just went by the way it appeared, we would conclude what everybody concluded. It's flat. In the same way, we conclude what everybody concludes about the idea that we're all separate from one another and we're all separate from the world, because that's the glasses we have on. That's where we're looking from. So when you use this metaphor, if you go above the earth and look down, for example, at the weather, right? If you go above the earth and look down at the weather, is it raining or is the sun shining? Yeah, it's both, isn't it? It's both, right? But on the ground, it's one or the other. So the view is different. The view is different. The view from above, you could say in the metaphor, the view from above, the view from the awareness itself, which is unmanifest into the specific what's happening. The view from awareness is what's happening below is the manifestation that occurs when you're down here in time and space. Up here, when you look at it, it's all happening at the same time. Right? Same thing is true with night and day, right? From above, when you look at the earth, is it night or day? It's both, right? So again, so from above, when you look at it, is what's happening below on the earth right or wrong? It's both. Depends on the location, right? If you're in Russia, if you're Putin, it's what's going on in Ukraine is right. If you're in this country, if you're the president of this country, it's wrong. So what's true? So this is what we're practicing. We're practicing getting the view that's free from the limited view that we have from conditioning. We're getting access to the view where there's freedom from the limited view we have as the conditioning. And so what does that look like in practice? Well, what it looks like in practice is if we understand the other view, even if it's just conceptual, and then if occasionally through the practice of meditation, paying attention to the breath, we get glimpses of that view, right? Then through that practice, that the reality of that view starts to become realer, starts to get realer, so that what's happening on the ground stops occurring to you the same way. For example, night and day, right? From ground level, we experience that the night and day is occurring, and we understand, for example, that without night, what would day be like? If there was no night, what would day be like? Right? It wouldn't even be day. There would be no difference. It would just be the same all the time, right? So night allows day to occur the way it does to us. We can enjoy the sunrise, we can enjoy the sunset, we can enjoy the moonlight, right? Night and day, right? So when you look at it from that view and you see that night and day are actually the separate sides of the same coin, and they work. It works. Night and day work together to have it occur to us in a way that produces an experience where there's something to be satisfied and appreciated in this experience. However, if we look at this metaphor in regard to life and death, right? Everybody's focused on life and avoiding death. We don't think about it, we don't talk about it, we don't let ourselves feel the feelings we have about it, right? It's not a topic that's a popular topic for people to talk about, even when people are dying, right? And we don't understand the fact that in the same way, if there was no night, how it would have a negative effect on day. If you don't allow yourself to be aware of death, it's going to have a negative effect on life. You don't have anything with which to appreciate the difference. So life, that's how you could easily end up with the conclusion life sucks and then you die, right? Because you have to be able to appreciate that it's a package deal. Life is not life without death, is it not? Without death, there wouldn't be life. What would we call it? There wouldn't be any way to describe it. It's just a continual reality of the same thing all the time. So when we understand this, when we see it, for example, in terms of the relationship between death and life and day and night, you can start to understand a little bit about why it's important to stop resisting and rejecting the death. And then, we can afford to do that because the good news is once you open yourself up to what you've been resisting and rejecting, transcendence becomes possible. So in the example I was giving in terms of if you go high enough and look at the earth, it's different. When you look down there, it's night and day. When you look down, the sun is shining and it's raining at the same time when you look from that view, right? So we say, oh, okay, well, if the metaphor works, then we have to get above the reality that we're experiencing in order to see it that way and be free from the suffering of being in the world where things are changing all the time. It's one or the other all the time, right? Well, the difference between the metaphor and reality is that in reality, that higher view is happening at the same time as the view you're having. It's not separate from, it's not different from the view you're having. That's why I can say the personality is the true self. You're always experiencing the true self. What we're practicing in meditation is stop resisting and rejecting the other half of the equation. Stop resisting and rejecting the other half of the equation, which is to say we start with the idea that we are the true self trying to transcend that, trying to experience that we're something that is not separate from other people and separate from life and separate from the world. But the reality of it is, at some point, so we start there, right, because you're stuck there, right? We start there because you're stuck there. And we start entertaining the other side of the coin, right? Which is not the personality, but the awareness, which is the mother of the personality, right? But the mother of the personality and the personality, so we emphasize that. So we talk about that, right? And once we talk about that sufficiently, we're talking about that conceptually, and once we talk about that sufficiently, the possibility of there being an essential self starts to occur to you to be real. It's actually true, right? But then the next thing that needs to happen is that you come to understand that even the personality is that same true self. The only problem is we're neglecting, resisting, and rejecting the essential self, And we believe that the personality is all there is, just like the day is all there is, and there's no night. You see, it's the same thing. There's no equation. There's no possibility of balance. It's all lopsided. Okay? So we start to learn about this other side of the equation conceptually through the teaching. And the irony is, and the interesting thing is, when I talk to you conceptually about the truth, I'm doing you a great disservice because you're a conceptual creature. So I'm talking in a way that you can understand about these things by conceptualizing it, okay? The problem with that is that because you're a conceptual creature and I'm talking to you conceptually, you can't help yourself but try and make the concepts produce the experience. That's eating the menu, or trying to eat the menu, right? So it's kind of like I'm reading you the menu all the time, you know, and you're getting hungry. You know, you want the experience, not the, you know, you don't want to hear the word hamburger, you want to taste it, right? You want to taste it, you want to experience it, right? And so that becomes more and more frustrating, doesn't it? Yeah, it becomes more and more frustrating because, you know, and one of the reasons it becomes frustrating is because you have this conceptual idea, oh, if I start to experience it, right, then there won't be any up and down anymore. I won't get upset anymore. There won't be any disturbing experiences anymore. I'll be just, everything will be beautiful and wonderful. You know, this is the conceptual understanding we have about what it is to be awake. Well, that's bullshit. That's total bullshit. You know, it's exactly the same. Exactly the same. That doesn't change at all. That doesn't change at all. The thing is this, that once you experience the truth and you realize that it's non-conceptual, that's why I can say to you, you're experiencing it right now, but you don't know it, right? Because you're trying to make the concepts turn into the experience. Well, the concepts were never the experience. The concepts are utilized in order for you to have a finger to point to the experience, but the concepts are not the experience. And the way your mind works is conceptual, right? So you keep trying to eat the menu. And then you get frustrated because the experience is not fulfilling. You know, I'm not getting the experience of the hamburger. I'm getting the experience of paper in my mouth, right? And at the very same time that conceptual understanding is occurring, the actual experience of the truth is occurring as well. But the experience of the truth is non-conceptual. It's not a word. See, that's the thing. You know, we're so hypnotized to concepts. You know, we're such conceptual creatures. We're such thinking creatures, right? The idea of something being non-conceptual to us is a concept, right? Oh, it's non-conceptual. What would that be like? You know, it's not just another concept, right? So you really have to get that it's not, and this is why I harp on this when I've talked about this before, that the experience of your true nature is no different than the experience you're having right now. And when you pay attention to the breath and you're moving your attention away from the thought activity, right, there's a possibility of a non-conceptual experience occurring for you because concepts are thoughts. That's the possibility. But you're so conditioned to be a thinking animal, a thinking person, right, that as soon as you try and bring your attention to the breath, and even the word breath is conceptual, isn't it, right? So there's something happening right now for all of you, for all of us, right, that is not a word, not a concept, right? That is not a thing, that is nothing, and yet that which I'm referring to is real. It's very real. It's there and it's very real. And it's unknown to us because it doesn't fit any picture. It doesn't have a form. Right? It's very real. It doesn't have a form. So it takes a while to be able to let go sufficiently of the idea or the concept about the truth so that the experience of the truth can start to get in, can start to be available to you. What's that like? What's that like? I can't tell you what that's like because that would be a concept, because now they're saying the quantum mechanics and the truth that was discovered directly 2,500 years ago are the same. Right? So what they're saying is, If you look at it from a direct experience perspective, consciousness, right, is not being produced by anything. Everything that exists as and in consciousness. The direct experience is that. That's the direct experience. It's just like I say to you here, you know, we all walk around in the world as if our consciousness resides in the body, right? And yet, as I have said many times, and you know, if you really do this experiment, you can't miss it. It's a direct experience. Your body exists in your awareness, does it not? I mean, if you just look at it, if you just look, you look and you shall see. You know, your body exists in consciousness. That's a direct experience. The ideas that the scientists have are conceptual understandings that they're trying to make fit the experience, and that's never going to happen. That's why when the scientists meet with the Dalai Lama and they present this theory, he literally laughs, like, you got to be kidding. And the way scientists who believe in, the scientists who study these things and follow the quantum mechanics understanding of it, right? They say these other scientists that believe that consciousness is being produced by the brain, they have to die. They're not going to change. You know, because their whole life has been invested in that understanding. It's just like fundamentalist Christians. They have to die. They're not going to change and become Buddhists. That ain't going to happen, right? But the reality of it is, for you and I, if you understand that the truth that offers us freedom and peace and satisfaction is always available. In fact, not only is it always available, but you are it. You are no thing. You are no thing. And that no thing that you are is always happening. It's always happening. And when you begin to notice, this is what they mean when they say people wake up, is that, oh, at some point, you know, it may be through practicing meditation, it may be through falling and hitting your head on the curb, it may be through almost dying. There are all kinds of ways that this happens, but when it happens, it's like, you know, all of a sudden the lights go on, and it's like, that's not new. That's been here all. If you look into your experience right now, there's something that's there that's always been there. It's never not there. It's just like your breath in a sense, because your breath is always there, right? Right? But how often are you aware of it? You're only aware of it when you actually pay attention to it, right? The same thing is true with your true nature. You know, it's like Nisargadatta said. His guru told Nisargadatta one instruction and then he died. And Nisargadatta took him very seriously and trusted what he said, and he practiced what he told him to practice. And what he told him to practice is he said, just stay focused on the I am. Focus on the I am. Now, what he meant by the I am is the same thing that you mean when you say I, right? When you say I, you're not saying I, Brian, or I, Frank, right? When you just say I, right? You're saying there's an existence happening here. I call it I, right? There's an existence happening here, I call it I. That's the I am that his guru was telling him to stay focused on. Go through your day. Keep looking at what's happening in your life like you're looking at the earth from high enough to see that good and bad are happening at the same time. Night or day are happening at the same time. All the weather conditionings are happening at the same time, right? So that you can get oriented about that and clear enough about that when these things happen here, when you're on one side of the equation, right? That you can have a balanced experience of it. It may be sunny right here, but it's raining somewhere else, and I'm aware of that. So what's the weather? Well, it depends on where you are. It depends on the view you have, right? It's the same thing with this teaching and these practices. It depends on the view you have. The view we share with one another is the one that we've been conditioned to see from, right? The view of being a separate self, right? But just because we have that view, that doesn't make it the truth. It just makes it a view, right? At the same time that's the case, the reality of our essential self is happening at the very same time. And when we start to notice that, when we wake up and realize that that's there, that that's happening at the same time, I'm pointing up because that's the way people talk about this, heaven and earth and all the rest of it, but it's simultaneously happening at the same time, right? And so you have to train yourself to notice it because it's been happening at the same time your personality's happening, right? But you and I have been conditioned and hypnotized to identify ourselves as the personality. So that which is happening at the same time that personality is happening keeps going unnoticed, right? And the more you try and notice it, the worse it gets because you're trying to notice it with a conceptual understanding of it that's not it. It's not it. And yet it's there all the time. And when you begin to get glimpses of it, and when you begin to recognize it, and when you wake up to the fact that it's there all the time, it gives you a transcendental experience. It makes transcendental experience available. What do I mean by that? It means that you can be angry and not angry at the same time. Because now you're seeing, oh, it's raining right now, right? You could say, I'm using anger compared to the weather, right? The weather condition right now is it's raining, right? But I know that's just a temporary situation that's occurring in space and time. And another place, it's not raining, the sun's shining, right? So now that I know that, when it's raining, my experience of it being raining doesn't occur to me the same way. It occurs to me as something that came into existence and will go out of existence. And the meaning I give it is the meaning I give it. It's not inherent to, there's no meaning in the raining. There's no meaning in the sunshine. Yeah? Human beings are meaning-making machines. We make everything mean something, right?
That's a good line.
What?
Meaning-making machines.
Yeah, well, I didn't make that up. One of my teachers did.
That's a great line.
Most of what I say is stolen material.
Rain and sun, but if you see a tornado coming at you, that serves you well to give it meaning.
That's right. That's why the Buddha called it the middle way. Don't make the mistake of going from thinking you're personality to thinking you're the awareness, and you're not the personality. Then you're in just as much trouble as you were when you thought you were the personality, because then you'll step in front of a bus. You see? So you have to learn how to exist in both worlds at the same time. It's lopsided now because you've been conditioned and the world's operating lopsided because everybody's been conditioned to believe in the separate self perception of everything, right? But once that starts to become an equation, once you start to realize, oh, there is an opposite to that. There is nothing and something. There's night and day. There's death and life, right? And they're one thing. They're not separate from one another. They're one thing. And when you start to experience that, you're free from the suffering that occurs when you're only on one side of the story. Because now because you see, one of the things you understand is the thought processes that occur and the emotional states that occur, right? They're coming from the lopsided part. They're coming from the conditioned part. So you stop buying into that like it's the whole story. It's no longer the whole story. Right? So you can experience anger and not be angry. You can experience satisfaction, and know that this satisfaction and dissatisfaction, opposite sides of the same coin. They need each other.
And that's duality and non-duality.
Yeah, duality and not, see, we talk about non-duality because duality is the condition we start out from, right? But once you understand non-duality, right? Non-duality and duality are the same thing. Your personality and your essential nature are the same thing, right? And when you know that, you're free from the suffering that occurs when you only think you're the personality. When you're only thinking of personality and you're experiencing being in time and space, these concepts that we speak of can only occur to you to be possible to happen in the future. Do you follow that? Can only occur to you to happen in the future, which means you're locked out. You're locked out, even though that's not true. It's occurring to you that can only happen in the future. Why? Because it's not happening now. No, you don't. You think it's not happening now. That's all. It is happening now. It can happen in the future. That's why we're paying attention to the breath, because other than when you're paying attention to the breath, there's no past and future. There's just the breath. There's no past and future. As soon as you have a thought, you're in past and future. So that's the difference. We're not saying you should, this teaching and these practices are not saying you should only live in the eternal now. No. We're saying you should stop only living in time and space and understand the eternal now and time and space are the two sides of the same coin. And when you understand that, you can start having some fun instead of being so freaked out about it all. You can start having fun in life because you realize once you open yourself to experience the truth of mortality, for example, right? When you open yourself to experience the truth of mortality, you transcend mortality. Because when you open yourself to experience the truth of mortality, it becomes possible for you to realize that the only thing that's going to die is something that came into existence and will go out of existence. That which is unborn can't die. And that which is unborn is your true nature. However, at the same time, on the other side of the coin, that true nature is manifesting as a personality in time and space, right? Well, when you get the whole picture, you transcend the whole thing because you realize the only death that is going to occur is the death of something that never actually existed like you. Never actually existed like you. In other words, the personality and the physical body doesn't have an awareness. This body is not aware of itself. The personality doesn't have an awareness. It's a program running. It's a thought process, has no awareness. Right? So when you wake up and you realize the truth is that awareness is the essential nature of what is manifest, and what is manifest occurs in time and space. It appears and disappears, right? But you are not that. You are the awareness of that is available at all times, that wasn't born and is not going to die. Now, if you get that as a concept, it's attractive. It's, if you get it as a concept, it's something that you are interested in. But you got to go through the process. This is why they talk about the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul is that you've totally bought into the conceptual understanding about the truth, right? And now you have you have a fever about it. You really want this, and you're playing beat the clock because your body's going to die at some point. You want to get this handled before the body dies so you can experience freedom from death, right? But the process of doing that just gets worse and worse and worse because you're trying to get the menu to be the hamburger. You're trying to make the concept be the experience. It can never be the experience. So you have to go through this dark night of the soul, this suffering, this despair, right? This depression and this despair, like, I'm never going to get it. This is worse. Now that I know what's possible, I'm suffering more than I ever did, right? Because before there was no way out and I was suffering. Now there's a way out and I'm suffering. It's worse than it ever was, right? But if you stay with it, right? If you keep your faith in the practice, and if you keep your faith in the truth, the dark night of the soul will pass. It'll pass. And the time will come when you realize that what you were going through was just the final phase of being stuck in the conceptual understanding about the truth. The final phase of being stuck in the conceptual understanding about the truth. And the only way out of that is you have to take it to its final conclusion, which is despair and hopelessness. It's hopeless. There is no hope. There's no hope that a conceptual understanding will ever be the truth. There's no hope. So you have to actually experience the hopelessness of the whole thing, right? And when you experience the hopelessness of the whole thing, it's kind of, at some point, you just kind of resign. You just kind of let go. You just kind of give up, right? And when you give up trying to make something that was never a concept, an experience, the experience becomes obviously available. It was there all along. It was there all along. It was there all the time. The thing about this that's important to understand is that This truth is this is, it's reading the Heart Sutra recently, and at the end of the Heart Sutra, it emphasizes this is true, not false. This is true, not false. This is real, not false. This is true, not false, right? Why is that hard? Why is that important to emphasize? Because even if you're ignorant about it, it's true. You're free even if you think you're in jail. You are your essential nature right now, no matter what you think. And you can't die because it's true that death isn't real. It doesn't exist. You can't die. So this is one of the ways that Christianity works as a faith system, right? Because what the priest will tell you is that just have faith. Just have faith. You're not going to be able to get to us from a conceptual understanding, so just have faith in it. Just relax. Just relax, because nothing's going to happen when you die. That doesn't necessarily quell the fear that people have about their mortality because they've been avoiding it. But if you stop avoiding it and you let yourself feel the fear of your mortality, it's possible to recognize that fear and that mortality is just another function of the personality. That's all. Nothing's happening. All right, any other questions? Yes.
I was thinking in terms of creative arts and awareness. Awareness doesn't have judgment, but when I look at a movie, when I look at a piece of art, I judge it. Oh, I like that piece of art. I don't like that one. I love this movie. That movie's not so hot. From an awareness point of view, how does awareness judge artistic creations?
By allowing itself to forget that it's awareness and be the personality and then judge the artistic creations.
So it still forms opinions.
Of course it does. Listen, if the truth is that all there is consciousness, it's doing all of it. It's doing all of it. It's having the personality experience itself to be limited and separate from its essential nature so it can experience life and art and creativity and judgments and evaluations and all the rest of the shit. So you can be a schmuck. Have a good night.